Alright, so I've got the pump all cleaned up. I actually cleaned up really well. Got the inside cleaned out a little bit. Got a new length of hose on there. Already have the hose clamps. The opening here on the engine is wide enough to fit the hose clamps through with a little bit of effort there. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fish both through like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and screw the fuel pump back into the engine. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect the hose up. Now, I actually made this hose a little longer, make servicing it a little bit easier in the future if you have to come back and take it off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and connect that fuel hose there, get this tightened up, and once I've got that, then I'll cut the other pieces of hose right here. I will get those in that part right there from the pump to the carburetor. Now what I'm going to do is the one that goes to this firewall right here, this little holder, air cleaner holder, I'm going to put a little WD-40 on to make it slide through a little bit better. And so that'll be a pretty easy operation right there. So getting on the downhill swing, next part after that, we'll be running this longer hose right there. Alright, so all the lines up until the fuel selector valve have been replaced. So this line's new. All the lines going to the fuel pump. This line, you can even see the remainder. I actually ended up this time using PB Blaster to kind of lubricate this O-ring right there so it slides through a little bit better. Going back together really well. So the next task is to replace these two fuel lines right here that go to the selector valve. Now what I'm going to do is, see this zip tie right here? That zip tie actually holds those two lines up, way back in there. You can kind of tell. You got to fish around a little bit. So those are the next two lines I'm going to replace. But what I'm going to do is I'm not going to cut. I'm going to cut the lines a little long. So I'm going to start right there, and I'm actually going to feed them back through using a barb and a hose clamp. Actually, barb. I think a barb will normally work. That way I don't have to worry about routing and stuff. I think I can do that. I've done it in the past. We're going to see if I can try it this time, and I'll let you know how it works. So everything's going back together really well. This is one of those short little projects that will really improve the performance of a 318 if the lines have never been replaced before. It does wonders in terms of keeping the fuel system clean. What I'm going to do next, after we get the fuel lines done, is I'm going to pop the top off the carburetor, clean out the bowl of the carb, take some of that apart, see how everything looks in there. Can't really do a whole lot since I don't want to take the carb off. We're going to see if we can just work it out with work out the carb problems with some seafoam and stuff like that. So carry on with replacing the fuel lines, and I'll come back and tell you when I have some more progress done. Alright, it's starting to look like a 318 again. So this is one new hose. You see it's a little long, and I've actually got some slack built in to up here, and then the other hose is still connected to the reel. I wanted to go ahead and get all this back together before I did another video. You can see all the new hoses in there, so that's kind of nice. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the battery tray in. That way I can double check my hydro handle, everything else, make sure that everything's good to go there, and before I need to make any adjustments. So only thing I have left to do is put those the two bushings into the gas tank, and then we can hook everything up and put some gas in and fire it up, see if it runs. The only other thing I'll do before I do that is I'm actually going to take the top of the carburetor off, clean it a little bit. That's a pretty simple procedure. So I'll get to work on putting the bushings into the tank, and we'll go from there. Okay, so we're getting ready to put these bushings back in the tank. So you can see I've already got one done. I wanted to practice a little bit before I did it. So what I've done, or what I will do, is I will actually use a heat gun because it's a little cooler outside, so this rubber is pretty hard. I'll use a heat gun to briefly heat this up. I opted just to use the regular hose because this was what I have on hand. Obviously, this will last probably 5 to 10 years before it's going to fall off or anything. You can't get you cannot get a hose clamp through the openings, so that's why I'm not using any hose clamps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in there after I just briefly heat this rubber up, and then I actually use just a larger, long, flat-bladed screwdriver to get it started. You want to be really, really careful if you do that. Probably not advisable, but I'm going to do it anyway because this is how I do it. Just use a flat-bladed screwdriver, and you can kind of poke the edges around into there, and then you can just basically screw it in, and it works just fine. So I'm going to do that, and then we can hook up. We can do the last bit of the hookups, and we should have a fuel system that is complete, and we can go ahead, clean the carb out, and then fire it up, see if it runs.